Hey everyone, this is SIG Scalability meeting, 20th June, and today we have quite a lot of topics to discuss. So maybe let's start with the first one from Matt.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, I asked the same question in the Slack channel, and maybe Marcel's answers have already clued me in, but I thought I would ask here as well. Basically, I work for Microsoft. I work in cluster API mostly, and I've been working on Kubernetes for a while before I was a Microsoft employee. But um, several people really would like to see Azure represented on the performance dashboard. And initially, we were interested in seeing if AKS, our managed service, could get up there. But you were saying, that's problematic, and I can see why. It's not something we could address easily through the open source community if there were to be a problem. And I think that was what you were saying. So we would still be interested, even if that's not the case, that AKS, the managed service, would appear on the dashboard. We'd still be interested, I think, in getting Azure up there, either through COPS or maybe through Cluster API, which is what we work on, although I know that no one's done that particular path before. So that's my brain dump, and I'm just basically asking you all, since I know SIG Scalability is responsible for the performance dashboard, how would you get started on something like that, or what pointers do you have?
Actually, I'm wondering, do I remember correctly, Hakuna, that you were working on the AWS, right?
Yes. I've added
Yeah, so
stuff for
probably
the
you have way more context than I do, but I think like on high level, it's starting from like even setting up, the accounts on particular cloud, and that usually happens with SIG testing, I think, SIG infra testing.
Okay.
And then I think you put quite a lot of work into like even making sure that the configuration for chaos is correct to be able to run the test, right? And I think it was iterative process where for AWS it was started with 100 nodes and then it was scaled like 2000 and different bottlenecks were being fixed along that way. But I will leave it up to you, Hakuna, to tell a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, I think you kind of covered it, like the way, at least like the initial path of like, yeah, setting up the accounts um like how we did it in an incremental fashion of like from 100 nodes to 500 nodes. At that point, the reason being is because like, at least like some of the reasons being is like the COPS was never tested at that scale. So I'm assuming like here, like you're talking about, Matt, is like you want to run like a 5K node test on Azure.
Ideally, yeah, but I'm sure we
Uh,
can't just jump there all at once.
Yes. So yeah, I think we did it on AWS COPS, and then like right now, yeah, I think I would suggest like probably like start with 100 and 500 nodes and see like how it's working out. And uh, yeah, I think there are like certain repos like where you have to make the changes like in terms of like test infra, as well as like also maybe I don't know like if you are like trying to you generally like I think the what I understood from the community is like they are trying to merge even the Google to COPS, to migrate Google also to
Yes,
COPS.
yes.
Yeah. So
Okay.
we are
That is
yeah,
true, yeah.
yeah. So we are trying to like basically use as one tool that is like testing on multiple providers. So um I know like you suggested cluster API, so maybe I don't know, like that will be a new path altogether. But yeah, COPS would be like is what like I think community is going with at this point.
Yeah, that's good info. We don't want to
Yeah.
swim upstream
Yeah,
too hard.
I think one more thing to point out is that like if you add this test, then usually someone specific to cloud provider is investigating regressions in that
Yes.
particular test. So if the test on GCP fails, but not on AWS, then probably it's related to GCP infrastructure itself, right? So.
Yeah.
I mean, like if all of the tests start failing, then obviously from someone from SIG Scalability on-call can debug that, right? But if it's particular to cloud provider, then usually we need someone who is really familiar with particular cloud provider if it's specific to that one.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think basically for some time, like you might just want to run like for a few days or few iterations, like and see like it's not flaky and it's stable enough. And then eventually, like then you'll probably like can convince with that data the release informers, SIG group, like then they'll accept that as a release informing, and then like slowly you can like progress that from release informing to release blocking at certain point. That's the
Okay.
progression.
Release blocking, yeah, informing to blocking.
Yeah.
Yeah, at some point that would obviously be our goal. Azure should be part of the overall signal. And what I understood you to say, Marcel, was essentially we'd be signing up our cloud provider Azure maintainers for more sort of on-call type duties. Someone would need to be responsive to
I
that.
think,
So
yeah, I mean, like, there's no point in having test if it will keep failing, right? So
yes, yeah, exactly.
there's of course some kind of like maintenance that needs to happen from time to time. I mean, like, after some time, obviously, like the tests usually become very stable and it's no longer the issue. But we've seen sometimes regressions particular only to one cloud provider, and then sometimes it just requires internal knowledge of how particular cloud provider works. Or sometimes it could be just like KOps or or cluster API integration with particular cloud provider, right?
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you both. This answered several of my questions. Jonathan, do you have any other questions? Jonathan Tong is here on the call, and we're both looking into this.
Hey, yeah, I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Jonathan. I'm also working with Matt on this performance dashboard thing at Microsoft. I guess I don't really have too much, mostly just trying to find a place to start, like Matt. If there's like some sort of reference implementation or sort of copy paste we can start to play with, that'd be good.
Yeah, sure. So actually, I mean, it's for the KOps. I saw that you were linking AWS 5,000 nodes, right?
Yeah.
Okay, this is the place where we have. I'll place the link. So here's essentially place where we have all of our all of our tests, right? But as I mentioned, it's either like legacy GCP kind of scripts that set up the cluster, or for AWS, it's KOps. And in particular here, for example, for release blocking, there is pro job, that sets up 5,000 nodes and runs the tests. I can link it as well, but I think like the starting point is probably setting up even like the infrastructure in cloud provider, and that probably would require work with test infrastructure because I'm not really familiar with how the infrastructure for particular cloud providers is managed right now. I mean, I know it is for AWS and for GCP. I'm not sure what's the current state of Azure, and if the current projects that we have would even allow to spin up hundred of nodes, for example, right?
Yeah.
And then there is also like who pays for the infrastructure, right? Like for GCP, it's Google. For AWS, it's AWS, and then probably someone would need also to pay for Azure infrastructure to run those tests.
Yeah. And Azure is kind of in process of finally paying for common infrastructure at this point, but I don't think it's settled yet. But so that's kind of a separate conversation. And
yeah, I
and
think that's probably the first one that,
Yeah.
you would need to figure it out, right? But except for that, like if you would be interested in using our tooling with Cluster Loader, and perf-dash, you can still set it up and use with either AKS or even Azure. And if you run into any problems, then we can help you on Slack. There are some guidelines how to use cluster loader in our perf test. Kind of like you know, for like initial setup. Yeah, here and maybe here. There are some guidelines like how to even write the tests, but there are tests that are prepared and being run for 5,000 nodes there as well.
Okay, so I guess one additional question is there a way to, like, say we write up this YAML, is there a way to validate it locally or run it locally to see that it works, before we try to PR and merge something?
Depends on the test, right? Like some of the tests you can even, like the simple test you can run in kind cluster, right? For merging the test, I don't know, Hakuna, how
So-
you were testing it.
So yeah, in the cops, like you can add it as a pre-submits, right? And then like you can like kick off one-off tests, like even before like that configuration is like able to work. So that's how we did it. And then like once it works and there is no flakiness, or like at least for that respective configuration, and then we'll just generally merge it.
Oh, it seems like accidentally I linked someone else repository. Okay.
Oh.
Okay. So do you have like good high level understanding, and then like we can go and figure it out any bottlenecks on Slack if you want, or on the next sync?
Yeah, I think me and Matt have some links we can go over together, and then from there for stuff we can continue offline. And
Yeah, especially here, like there are some pointers how to run it locally, even for small clusters, and then you can take a look how it's being run for 5,000 nodes in CI as well.
okay, and you're Marcel, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, thanks for the guidance.
Thanks very much. Yeah, very
So,
helpful.
look forward to working together.
Looking forward as well. Okay, Hakuna, your topic next.
All right. So what I was wanting to discuss is like currently like are like the SLOs that we have defined in the community are like limiting to pod startup SLOs and the API service SLOs. Just wondering well, like wanting to get some thoughts like from the community, just like because I can go ahead and like define if we agree like at least at the top level, like, oh, these are some things that like users care about, because I see that like from the AWS side, like these like the users usually generally care about these things. So uh like like what like one thing is like the pod creation rate, right? Like can we like if I like create a pod like at a certain rate, like can like that be can we like guarantee a certain SLO for that can work? Yes, of course, just like on the vanilla Kubernetes itself, like we are guaranteeing this, like the other SLOs. So can we do that kind of thing, or like even the creation rates for the config map secrets around that? Like can we like have an SLOs around that, and like even like with respect to the list calls, can we say like okay,
Okay.
yeah, we can have a list calls like for this number, like probably X per second. But today, like it will violate like some of the API servers list call SLO that it defined, which is like 30-second. But that's because like even like we don't have like certain thresholds defined around it. So can we like go and have like certain, as long as the thresholds are within this bounds, can we like, so just like trying to close the loop as much as we can, like, and like also add value to the users, like what users care about, like on top of like the SLOs that we have. Does it make sense, Marcel?
Okay, so let me let me start it. Okay, so we, as you mentioned, like we have pod startup SLO, right?
Yes.
So what do you mean by like SLO around pod creation and deletion rates?
So
Like,
let's say,
pod startup SLO itself also contains pod creation time, right?
yes, the thing is, but we don't like define like a scale around it, right? Like I can't say like, oh, I can create 1,000 pods per second and still like meet the pod SLOs. Does it make sense? Even on the vanilla
Uh,
Kubernetes, like if I create like the pods around like 1,000 per second, um, like can we guarantee like the pod SLOs will like be intact with like less than 5 seconds that we are promising? Because that number is
okay,
not defined.
I think I see what you mean.
Yeah.
So I think like our current approach is to kind of provide limits within
Mm-hmm.
which all the SLO is always met, right?
Yes.
So when you're saying 1,000 pods per second, well, then we do not guarantee that in Kubernetes right now that the pod startup SLO will be met, right? It doesn't mean it won't, but it doesn't mean it will. It will depend on what features you are going to use, right? Like for example, like if you have secrets or config maps, the pod startup latency will be slower than compared to pods without it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the approach that we have with current SLOs and SLIs is to define the boundaries within which,
Mm-hmm.
like whatever number of objects you have, the SLO is always met. And obviously, like you can stretch those dimensions outside of these limitations, but it's very user specific, I think.
Yeah. So I think that is what I was like trying to say is like we didn't define these upper bounds, right? Like, oh, we can meet this pod SLOs, like whatever that you are trying to say, which includes the pod creation for 5 seconds, but we didn't define the upper bound of like on the vanilla Kubernetes. Oh,
I
at a
mean,
certain, that's the scale. I think it's more, I think it can be talked more as a scale than an SLO, I would say.
so I think it is actually defined. Maybe it's not super easily defined, but we have this part which is obviously, not up to date probably. But for example, we have information that like what's the number of pods per node, or like how many endpoints per service you should have on average. This kind of information is I'm wondering if there is churn. There's no churn defined, I
Yeah, there is
think,
no
but
churn defined.
yeah, I mean that's definitely some. So how I see it is, for example, for churn of the pods, we should definitely define it,
Mm-hmm.
and say like, okay, if churn of the pods is, let's say, up to 100 pods per second, then all the SLOs are met, and that's
Yes.
totally fine with me. And
Yes.
actually, 100 pods is probably something we test in CI right now.
Yes. Yes. I think we also do like 500 like with scheduler actually, like if I recently submitted. But yeah, I think I think we are on the same page. Probably like the terminology is different. What I'm like trying to get at is like the churn rate for these resources, even though it's like within the threshold bounds, like that those have to be defined. Uh,
Yes.
or because that is much like kind of like valuable for the Kubernetes users is what I'm like trying to get to.
Oh yes, for sure, for sure. I do agree. I
Mm.
think defining those additional dimensions that users care about it's super important, because yeah, like there's huge difference if someone has a scheduler with 100 QPS only binding 100 pods per second, or 1,000, right? And
Yes.
we don't specify this right now in the doc that I mentioned. And I'm definitely up to extending that documentation. The only thing is, I would also make sure that there is CI coverage for this specific case. So if we are lacking, this particular dimension being tested in CI, then I would probably start there first to ensure that the configuration works.
Okay, so do you want is like the steps to like get there? Do you want me to just like go ahead and like propose this churn rate information like as part of this like uh, the docs that we have where the SLOs are, and then like come up with a test where that can like run and then like like validate this. So what I was like trying to get to is like, okay, churn rate is like X per second, and that X per second is not defined, but this is what it's a work in progress thing. And then like we use this test, and then like, oh, this is the X per second that we are validating. So we go just change the X per second.
Yeah,
Does it?
exactly. I think it definitely makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I think then I'll start like creating those peers. Thank you.
Okay, and there's one more topic. I saw that you, Hakuna, actually added the link with the same issue, but in Kubernetes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe I will explain a little bit more. So recently I stumbled upon the problem that the list requests that don't that go to etcd with the limit actually are not, so the time complexity is not linear to the limit, but it's actually linear to the amount of keys within the range, which was quite surprising to me. So I was actually hoping that Wojtek will be here because I think he was part of the remaining item count thing in Kubernetes to discuss it. But I just wanted to raise awareness of this, and I think it will be definitely beneficial if we figure it out, like how to fix it. And I see that Hakuna actually just mentioned exactly the same thing in Kubernetes itself. And I was actually wondering, how do we go about it? Because I haven't read issue by you, Hakuna, but I was wondering, did you have any proposal how to fix it? Because it was not obvious to me. Because on one hand, there is etcd API, which in theory should always return the total amount, total item count. And I think the only reasonable way is actually to fix it in etcd itself. And I saw that Marek actually prepared some POC that could do that with interval trees to reduce the complexity on the range requests.
Yeah, I think when I created this cap, or when I was discussing with HCD, like at least like internally, I don't think this proposal like with Siratius was there. I think it was more about like, okay, this is the limitation. Like from the HCD is like, okay, we can make this change as long as like the Kubernetes is able to like make the change to leverage that feature from the HCD, so that we can so that like that they don't just implement something that like is not going to be used, kind of thing. So that's why I went ahead and like discussed this with like API machinery, and then like they kind of accepted the approach. Like theoretically it makes sense. So I think and then like I just went ahead and like after that meeting like created a cap issue, and I was like planning on like picking this up like in July sometime from the Kubernetes
Okay.
standpoint. Yeah.
So actually, I'm wondering like how it would work. Like etcd would still compute with each paginated request the item count, I think.
So there is like work that HCD have to do that basically with the feature flag, with the feature flag enabled. Like, okay, what we are saying like from the API server is like, hey, I don't need the count. I don't want to rely on your count. You don't have to do that additional computation on your end. So that way it's going to enhance the performance on the HCD. that will reflect back to us. Yeah, as long as like we maintain the count on our end and not break the users, like backwards compatibility.
Okay, I see. So basically, like introducing some flag in etcd that will skip the item count, and then on Kubernetes side, just make sure we don't use it
Yes.
if we don't need it. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
that makes perfect sense. So just FYI, there's another way where we wouldn't need to do anything in Kubernetes, which is the draft from Marek.
Yeah, that's kind of news to me. Like I think it looks like it was like recently added. I wasn't paying attention there.
Yes. I talked with, because we noticed this issue maybe a week ago, and I was like, I just reached out to Marek, and I was like wondering if there is something that we could do, and he just prepared POC. So
Oh, nice. And looks like he's pitching something around like the AVL trees. I just like skimmed through it just like right now. So
yeah. So the idea is to like iterate only the keys that you need to iterate through, and for everything before and after the limit, just count it from the tree.
okay. I hope like if they do it like on their end, like I think there's like it'll be like pretty cool like from our end, like we don't have to make any changes. But initially like he's the one like who's pushing for like, okay, let the Kubernetes community accept whatever that you're saying, only then like we'll make the change on the etcd. So that was the push in general. So that's why we had to coordinate between etcd and kh, and this skip is like a medium to that.
No, okay. Makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's all we had for today. Thank you all, and see you in 2 weeks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.